Alright, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have a 23 Temple of the Jade Serpent, and for the week cycle we are Fortified, Volcanic, and Sanguine. I don't really think our spellbook has much we can offer the group as far as the fixes go, but this is probably the most sensitive and hardest key for the healer this week, and that's because of these nasty little lesser Sha. But with that being said, I think out of all the specs for healers, I think Discipline can probably handle it better than any other spec right now. And it's a real chance to prove ourselves. And I will say off the top, this was probably the best key I've recorded in a long time. So I'm excited to show you guys my methods to get through these Sha pulls. But really all we need is a well-timed Shadow Covenant Mindbender. That's really all we need to get through it. It just has to be perfect spot on. But thankfully, we don't have to just rely on our green healing. We have these pull modifiers with the Rapture, Barrier, and Pain Sup. Those are spells we want to full send on these Sha pulls. So the way I would divide it up is Shadow Covenant for every Sha pull with one pull modifier. And so obviously the Rapture is great. The Barrier is great. And then you want those to line up with your output. And then we have things like Pain Sup, which I'm thinking are more and more just a personal defensive for myself. Often the tank is not in nearly as much threat of dying as the rest of the party. So I do just default giving it to myself more than anything. And that's because I feel if I can live as the healer, the chances of everyone living is better. So we are going to have some good examples here of how to get through these pulls, and I'll talk about it as we go. But for talents, I do run Holy Nova. I think it's great for this key, which I'll talk about more, but we want to touch all of these lesser Sha, and that's for my Rage Feather Trinket. So I think that's the best thing you can do for a group. You don't really want to dump your Shadow Covenant Mindbender for DPS. You really need to reserve it for the HPS and those pulls, but you can always rely on your Star and your Holy Nova to distribute your Rage Feather. And then I do run Vampiric Embrace. I'm really just trying to simp for the group. I want to time this key. I think it probably took me 10 tries to finally get it, and thankfully it was easy. But I think on Fortified weeks, maybe there's an argument to go for the Leech. I think that's fine. But Vampiric Embrace, also fine. And then Mass Dispel is going to be a big play for Temple keys. There are so many places you're going to need it, so you definitely want to take Mass Dispel. And then my Discipline side has not changed. This is a full DPS build, long Schism, long Shadow Covenant. I do not take these defensive points. I just don't think it's necessary. And that is that's about it. So we are going to talk about this more as we go. So let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, so we are about to get going here. And off the top, it's always a great idea to plan where your PI is going to go. You can look at things like what spec handles it best. There are charts out there for that. Maybe who has most experience, who has best item level, things like that. But this first pull is no joke. This entire first hallway is no joke. And the first pull is really going to set the pace for the dungeon. So we do want to drop cooldowns a little bit. And I think I open here with Dot, Spread my Dot, and Rapture. Using Grid2 to monitor my shield values. PI is out on the Mage. And you always want to dodge that Ripple. First pull is always a great place to run your Shocking Disclosure Potion, and it's not a bad idea to get Mass Dispel on cooldown, just to make sure we all live. And a great play is don't forget that you have a single Dispel in your book. So I think as a ranged, you should always practice dodging the Ripple, but as a melee, I think it's fine to gamble a little. Single Dispel is great. Okay, so here's our Barrier and Wall. And one important thing to note here is my big guys are the darker red color. That is who you want to focus. So I don't think Shadow Covenant and Mindbender are that easy to play in this first hallway. You kind of just have to send it and do your best. So I think my first Shadow Covenant and my second, I'm missing Torments, but everyone's living. Okay, this pull is a little bit safer. No need to dump cooldowns, except for your Mindbender, always dump him. And we can get some damage here for once, but not a bad idea to work in a Radiance just to cover the pulsing damage. And I think I got 5 Torments there. Always want to watch for that sub 20% range, and that's how you're going to snipe a 5th Torment with Shadow Word Death. Single Dispel. And one important thing to note with these packs, within Bigwigs I have all audibles disabled except for the Ripple. And that's because that's kind of my system, which I use to dodge it. It's the only thing that matters here. It's the only thing you need to hear. Well, I will say, I do have that trumpet sound for the cast. That is a cue to interrupt. It's an option to interrupt. But I am kind of trusting my team here with that. And for that one, that was about as good of a Mass Dispel as you can get. You want to precast it in such a way that no ticks of the damage go out. So the front end of the attack lands, and you dispel it immediately before any ticks go out. That's what we did there. And for this boss, we are non-tyrannical. Really, the only priorities are positioning. And then I do see that attack before it goes out. That is a great opportunity to shield. I try and not cast shield unless it's buffed from my 4-piece. So if I have a shield to drop, I'll shield ahead of it, but an atonement works just fine too. It's just kind of nice if you can prevent spike damage. Great way to use the shield. And really sad to see our first attack that went out. Our rogue dumped it in melee range. He didn't take it out. So we have to deal with that the whole fight. So in the phase where we're not getting washed away, that is where we want to time our Shadow Covenant. When you're moving like this, you want to get some attacks in, but your priority has to be the movement. So in these moments where you can be still, this is where you want to drop your Mindbender Shadow Covenant, and then also drop shields on your allies. Okay, so now that I have a buffed shield, I'm waiting for an attack. Back on the Mage, who's already atoned. That's great. We get our mastery buff with the shield. And it looks like he played a spell too, but yeah, it's the best way you want to play your shield. And for once, it didn't chase me. But really, all I'm paying attention to here is the cadence of the 1, 2, 3 coming from the ground. And paying really close attention to where my feet are to make sure I'm on these little safe spots. And we're in execute range, so we're going to pick up a 5th Torment. I'm always making sure I refresh my dot before expiation spells. And Mindbender can be a little tricky, but in a boss pull like this, I do get my expiation spells out of the way first. However, if it were a standard trash pull, you might want to delay your Shadow Word Death in the pull just to increase your odds of getting an execute range and 5th Torment. But you want to make sure you play all of your Torment spells before the last second of your Mindbender, or they won't work. Yeah, so again, with your Shadow Word Death, you definitely want to have 1 per Shadow Covenant window, And best practice will be delay it to the latter half of your window, just trying to open up the odds of getting one execute. And PI is just about available. We had it come up mid-boss. And Rogue Skip. So these guys, I think the main reason they're hard is because the damage is so spiky. You can die really easily. Okay, so we have Lesser Sha. I'm expecting them to blow up. So all I'm doing in this about 10-second window is ramping my Harsh Discipline, and I'm casting Holy Nova just to get my trinket out. Precast Barrier right into Shadow Covenant Mindbender, where I had my 3-stack of Harsh Discipline waiting for me. Dumped a huge penance proc. So it's tempting to want to play your Mindbender early to get all of the damage in that pull, but I think that's kind of a bait. I think you want to just accept the fact that you're not going to get all the damage here and backload your Mindbender to recover the with the HPS. So this is now my Rapture pull, getting shields out in the group, and this is a perfect place to wall. And with these Songbird Queens, yeah, the tank does take significant damage. There's spike damage with a peck attack. Got to pay really close attention to him. But Rapture and some Atonement heals were all we needed to get through that one. And at this point, we're still holding on to Pain Sup, which is great. But Wall has been used. Mindbender Shadow Covenant is ready. Alright, and I hate this pull because I feel like I always get targeted with the bleed. And right off the top, some of my allies took damage. I think they stood in something. But I'm just not playing around here, so I paints up myself. And using Binding Heals, I flash heal others. And I'm anticipating the Beetle's attack, so I want to play extra defensively. So I had a Penance proc, and I went ahead and dumped it so I could give myself a shield. And I think that was the right play because we all lived. And I think you see that a lot in this pull. I'm giving my Penance proc shields to myself. I think we have an opportunity as a Disc Priest to be very tanky, and I think that's a great quality. Yep, so that was a defensive Penance proc into myself and capped it with another shield. And here's an offensive Penance and still cap myself with that shield. Yeah, whenever you get dots like that, I think it's fair game to play defensive. That procced shield, I'm really only ever dumping on myself or the tank unless there's an opportunity to cover something else. But for the most part, tanks have their own spells to recover their health.
It is not yet over.
I think the best play with our shields now is on yourself.
Let me shed some light.
So with this boss, not much happens here. I think it's actually kind of boring on non-tyrannical. My best word of advice would be in big wigs, turn everything off, especially the audibles. So if you have the audibles on, you're going to get spammed like 100 times a minute. Every time their intensity goes up or down. Just turn that off. It's not helpful. I think the best thing you can do is get this little weak aura that puts the intensity counter on their nameplate. I think that's a lot better way to track it than audibles. And then you'll also notice in party, I have that red dotted line around the rogue right now. Now it's on me. So that is marking the buff that gets passed around the group. They take extra damage, so that's a nice place to direct your buffed shields, or at least direct your atonements. And yeah, you don't really want it as the healer, so I took it for a couple globals and then I passed it back to the mage just by walking over him. Yep, gave him that buffed shield. Whenever there's dots like that out in the group, it doesn't matter if it's a boss or trash or whatever dungeon, using that buffed shield on top of a dot to mitigate it is Great.
5, 4, 3.
And also really important to note, we have Pain Sup coming available just now, and that was the last buff we had on cooldown. So the next pull is very hard, and it's kind of baited logic if you dump any cooldowns here, because you don't need them. So although Barrier would be nice, Rapture would be nice, this is just a cooldown reset. We're prepping for the next pull. You can easily get through this just with Atonement Healing. You do not need a pull modifier. I don't even think I used Vampiric Embrace. Yeah, I notice I have a lot of uptime on it, and I think that just goes to show I don't think it's totally necessary. I think the leech might be okay. And for this pull, we want to make sure we wall on the first Lesser Sha group and paints up ourselves as a personal defensive on the second. And ramping Harsh Discipline, my dots are out. Here is my second potion. I'm passing around my feather just with some Holy Nova and Star. My Harsh Discipline is ready. I lay the barrier down. I Radiance to cover the initial burst. And then right into my Mindbender. So, first round of Sha covered. Now we are prepping for the second round. I open with a Radiance straight into Rapture. Paints up on myself, and I'm shielding myself and the DPS first. And that was a really good example of Rapture for a couple of reasons. You definitely want to shield yourself and the DPS before the tank because you are quite a bit more squishy. And I also opened with a Radiance, and that's for two reasons. A shield is best on a healthy target, so you open with a Radiance, and also that applies Atonement, which will increase your shields by the amount of your mastery. It makes your Rapture quite a bit more useful. And now we're to the point where we have no spell modifiers, and I don't even have a large mob to attack. But there's an example where when there's not much threat at the moment, a well-timed Radiance and a Penance proc is all you needed to mitigate most of the attack. Get a quick drink in. And one really pro tip in this area is pan your camera in a little. So these are kind of just cooldown reset pulls. You have to dodge ground damage, but there's mild tank damage, and as long as you have a mage or a shaman druid to take care of the curse, there's really no problem. Pop that guy out with a quick life, and I think I got 5 torments there. So I've been playing with my focus target macro. I think I need to kind of reinvent my system a little bit. I've done the unthinkable and bought a foot pedal. I think that might be a good way to do it, but not set it up yet. Okay, so this pull, what modifiers do we have? Open, we have Rapture. Yikes. So Divine Star to open. Ramping my Harsh Discipline. Making sure a dot is out. And we go into Rapture and a wall. So this body pull was not me this time, and we have more Sha joining. That's a little spooky. But I set up my ramp perfectly. The Rapture covered the first round of Sha, and the ramp covers the second round of Sha. So I know there's going to be damage coming out. I work in a Radiance in the middle. And that is a really good example of where picking up a 5th Torment really helps your output for HPS and DPS. So the first round of Sha I took off with Rapture, so that wasn't too hard. And then the second round, I handled it with just making sure my ramp was timed perfectly. Had 2 really large Dark Reprimands. Had a 5th Torment, worked in a Radiance in the middle, and that was all that body pull needed. So again, these guys are kind of a reset. I think it's a more advanced theme or topic within WoW. But I know the only person here who can help me is the Mage with his decurse. So I am making sure I'm in range of him, in LOS of him. Something you got to think about. Party nameplates helps with that. So I don't know if there's any DPS people that watch this channel, but in times like that, where if like you have a dot on you of any kind, you have to make sure you're in line of sight of your healer. Don't make them work harder to help you. What's that expression? Help me help you? Something like that. Okay, so for this round of Sha, they're going to blow up. I am going to get my barrier going. It's a 3-minute cooldown, and we're all moving, which is a little bit of a gamble when it comes to barrier because people have to use it. But placing it on yourself is never a bad idea, just to make sure it helps at least you. I think the Mage blinks into it, so that's fine. And I've already done my job at this point. My ramp is well set going into that attack. And on the backside of those explosions, I have my Shadow Covenant and Mindbender there to pick up the healing. Also in these packs, I have it loaded into my important casts. Talked about it a couple of times, but I get a red bar that pops up on my screen, and that is just a cast opportunity that I can interrupt with fear. So these big Sha do have a haunting fear, I think is what it's called. But it's something you can help with, but I am just kind of trusting my team at this point. Paladins are usually really good with interrupts. And this guy, although not too hard, it is a time sink. So I do want to drop PI, get it rolling. There is no need to hold PI as long as you can get full value. And one thing with a Mage, they're kind of always in Icy Veins, so they're never a bad target. And for that, I raptured it off. Got pretty good value. And for this next one, we have no modifier, but we do have output. And so all that means is we need to time it well. So I'm delaying. I'm kind of AoEing the Lesser Sha a little bit. Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, Schism. Mind Blast, Penance, and worked in a Radiance at the very top. And as long as you have a big guy to attack, there's really no problem with it. But when you get in a place like this where you have no big guy to attack, you just gotta kind of manually do it with some flash heals. Get some atonement heals when you can. But snag a quick drink. This is a non-tyrannical boss, not much of a problem. But we do have dispels here. So I have my targeted spells weak aura show a dotted line on the cast. And then we dispel when it changes solid. Right there. And then I always try and time my Mindbender for after the dispel. I don't want to have to interrupt my window for a dispel. So I wait for the dispel, and then go straight into Mindbender Shadow Covenant. And all you can do here is make sure you expiate on a 6-second dot, get all of your torments, and really make sure you get that second large Dark Reprimand. And now we are in the Jade phase of this boss, where we have to have a Penance proc locked and loaded for your tank to mitigate that healing absorb. And you'll see on this one, I did not have a Penance proc already, and it put us in a little bit of a bind. But so I kind of do throw Shadow Covenant to the side here. I really think the best thing you can do for the tank is just make sure you have a Penance proc locked and loaded and ready to give it to him defensively. And the only thing you can do better for him, which I did on that last one, was you can pre-cast a Flash Heal and then flood a defensive penance. And that one, although I played it well, it was kind of a whoopsie-doopsie because the tank and I overlapped our spells. But the best way you want to play Paints up there is before the front end of the Jade attack. And in this phase transition, you always want to cast a Fade. And then for this phase, something I don't talk about too often, but it's a minor concept within WoW. But I was trying to condense those ground damage attacks so that I didn't clutter the battlefield as much. And all we can do here really is pump DPS, just make sure you don't get hit by the frontal. And in execute range, we are getting extra torments, which is great. Always wanting to take time to refresh your dot if it's under 6 seconds. And there we go. So potions are up. It's going to be really important for this next pull where we double. And the only semi-problem we run into here is the curse. So going straight into Mindbender would be great. However, I need to ramp with other spells. I get my Rapture going just to play defensively. I back this dot out of the group. And what sucks is the Demon Hunter stepped into it. But I do go into Shadow Covenant a little bit late. It is always nice if you can delay a spell like Shadow Covenant. If you can manage to play it on the back half of a pull, it's usually going to be better. I did drop a lot of torments though because I was trying to adapt to what was going on. And small note there, where I was in range of that leg sweep, you can always drop a Fear Bomb to interrupt that cast. Kind of takes the danger out of it for a moment.
5, 4, 3.
And for being a hard double pull, that was pretty good. PI is available. Let's go ahead and get it rolling. Goes right on the Mage. And you can see that Tidal Burst cast come up on my screen. Again, I am just trusting my team with that one. That was a pretty good Shadow Covenant. I think I got 4 Torments, 2 Dark Reprimands. Uh-oh. So the group is a little bit... The composition isn't best for this week. We don't have a strong punt in our composition. We had some Sanguine healing there. And you can see with my targeted spells weak are where that attack is going in party, but again, I'm trusting them to kick it. And this is the make or break pull of this run. So you do want to CC on Fortified. You want to take 1 out of the picture. I'm opening my ramp with dots. Cannot forget to watch ground damage. Pretty much all you got to do is watch out for frontals, watch out for ground damage, and time your heals properly, which is when the Sha die. So I'm slowly ramping my Harsh Discipline. I'm getting into a Rapture for the first round of Sha, just playing defensive. And I'm holding on to Pain Sup as late as I can in this pull. Here's our Shadow Covenant. Still holding on to Pain Sup. Working a Radiance just to play defensively. And there's our Pain Sup. So we have Barrier coming available. That is going to be the next spell. And I did watch this back ahead of time. Our tank dies, which is a real problem for this pull because we've done quite well. But he stood in ground damage. I watched that back. But we have PI, we have Barrier. We have got to send it just to close out this pull. PI's out. We have another round of Sha out. Lay down a Barrier. My Harsh Discipline is ramped. Shadow Covenant. Working a Radiance at the top. And I think I even got 5 Torments there. So another important note with pulls like this, you really want to customize your bigwigs to really only alert you of the things that are most important. And to you as the Disc Priest, that's the ground damage and the frontals. So I would say have pretty much all of your spell notices off except for those, just to help you with living. So yeah, anyway, in a pull like that, the quick run back from the tank is what saved us. and everyone was able to vamp and just kind of kite backwards. So this is a great boss for Mass Dispel, but I am kind of holding on this guy for a little bit. The best thing you can do with your single dispels is play them very quickly. First one instantly and the second one instantly. Alright, so first round here we go into Rapture. I don't think that is the best place for Mindbender, even though you'd get good damage out of it. Yep, so I Mass Dispel here, my Harsh Discipline is ramped, and this is where I put my Mindbender. I'm sure other people do it other ways, but I feel like I can get better value putting him on the boss. Let's get a little bit low. Radiance. And he cloaked that one off, which was perfect. And there was some mana regen. Also, so I feel like spells like Barrier and Rapture are better for the ads phase, which is why I don't play my Mindbender there. I let those spells aid the ads, and I just put my Shadow Fiend on the boss. Mindbender? So we did just get PI available, and for this round we have no pull modifier. The best thing you can do is quickly spread your dots for the HPS, and then just be really reactionary watching your party. Yikes, I'm not sure how the mage got low there. But that was a Mass Dispel. Unfortunately, it overlapped with the Ice Block, but that's fine. And again, right after the Dispel is when I go into my Mindbender. I am really trying to do my job here as the healer, so I'm working in a Radiance, pretty much all of my windows, Shadow Covenant windows. And your buffed shield from 4-piece is great for these dots that go out. And prepping for this next round of ads, you always want to scan your available buffs. It looks like we have Rapture and Barrier. I think I reached for the Barrier. Buff shield on the Demon Hunter. And I spam for that second Dispel as soon as it comes off cooldown. And I wait for these guys to land and delay by a second or two, and then lay my Barrier. So the damage does not go out instantly. There is a small delay. So that's why I delay my Barrier a little. And that was our Mass Dispel. It missed both, but you can always pick off the second with your single. And we're not going to get anything else going on in this fight, so I dropped my last Mindbender, pumping for my Torments, my Executes, and boss down. So we had only 44 seconds to spare, which is a little tight, but we were able to turn it out. I think this is an extremely hard key, to be honest, but thankfully that was a +10, and I'm at 3,020 whatever now, which is pretty cool. I'm glad to be over 3K, and I am really happy to have played with this Paladin. I did a near perfect 22 AA with him days prior, and I really wish I had it recorded, but I didn't. And then we crossed paths again in another pug for this one, and it was great. So looking at the DPS is always what I like to look at, and we are right at 31,000 damage per second, which I think is excellent. I think over 30 is a really nice place to be as a healer in a standard key. I think in the AA I did with this guy, I was at 39 and change. So yeah, I really wish I had that recorded. 40k damage from a healer is just nuts. But I was really happy to time this key, which was also nearly perfect. It's always nice when you have a key without any personal deaths. And I think we only had 2 deaths, and those were due to just small mistakes. But something I always like to look at is my DPS chart. And it's always important to catch the first 3 items. Your first 2 are always going to be Mind Blast and Dot, so it's really important to keep those up and rolling. And then I check my Crystalline Reflection, which was a little bit low for this key, but that is all right. And you see my Rage Feather comes in at a strong 3rd place, which is why we want to run things like Holy Nova and keep our Divine Star on cooldown. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Please check out my Patreon. And until next time, Disc out.